All right. Hello. Good morning. How's everybody awake? Alive? Background is pretty much in writing instruction, so this is going to be very geared towards education. So if you're not an educator, I apologize, but hopefully it'll still be interesting. So I wanted to briefly explain why I was inspired to write this paper. As a writing tutor, I've met hundreds of amazing and bright students with great ideas that have been made to feel inferior by writing instructors who simply correct their grammar mistakes and ignore the content of their writing. I know that even happened to me when I was in grammar school. It's like, but did you read it? I realized there was tons of spelling mistakes, but it's brilliant, I tell you. So they're made to feel that the way they communicate at home is wrong or a contaminant, whether it's in another language other than English or in a variety of English that's not standard. I think this is wrong. And if you look at science and history, it is wrong. So this is not to say that students don't need some guidance in academic writing, but as professors, we need to acknowledge that academic writing is not superior to natural home speech, it's just different. So I'm going to start by discussing a little bit about colonialism and its relationship to contamination in language. Hopefully it's all going to make sense. Okay. So in the essay, Purity and Contamination, Language, Ideologies in French Colonial Native Policy in Morocco, Catherine E. Hoffman of Northwestern University explains that there are metaphorical concepts of purity and contamination in regard to language and ethnicity. Hoffman explains that the key to colonialism's cultural policy was the management of difference, and linguistic difference appeared easy to ascertain. Descriptions of the subject populations in terms of their social, organizational, cultural, or linguistic practices were common to colonial projects because they made it possible to imply that indigenous political structures were just dispensable. Okay, thus, the concepts of contamination and purity inform colonial attitudes towards language in order to establish a dominant and subordinate power structure between colonialists and native populations. This happened in many colonized regions, including the United States, which is what we're going to focus on right now. So looking at the historical context of standard American English in the United States, we can gain insight into how it has been used as a tool to maintain dominant colonial power structures by propagandizing concepts of purity and contamination when it comes to language. Writing professors in the United States need to be especially aware of the origins of standard American English, so that they can tailor their pedagogy to embrace an inclusive point of view, using concepts like code switching, translation, and collaboration as more effective teaching tools for diverse students. So that's my main point. So what is standard American English? It's a variety of English spoken in the United States where 75% of the world's native speakers of English live. It is frequently associated with academia and scientific study. It is also one of languages attached to power and money. Many consider it to be proper English and adhere strictly to its prescriptive grammar rules. But how did we get here? Why does SAE maintain this importance? Some people might wonder, is standard American English the national language in the United States? Technically, no. Officially, the founding fathers who drafted the United States Constitution made no national language policy through legislation. But in reality, yes. This lack of legislation does not mean that the United States has not had a covert national language policy since it was formed. Okay. John Trimber, in Linguistic Memory and Politics of U.S. English, explains that covert policy was diffused throughout civil society, making language policy a matter of custom rather than law, operating through cultural formations instead of state mandate. Kind of snuck it in there. So people in power wanted to unite the newly formed United States by stressing a unified or pure language. Trimber describes how the United States as a new nation quickly turned to the project of forging a transcontinental empire based on slavery and relocation of Native American tribes. Noah Webster, creator of the famous Webster's Dictionary, of course, he played a big part in all of this. He pushed this agenda of pure language in his renowned book, Dissertations on the English Language, published in 1789. Webster used the rhetoric of language purity in order to advance his political agenda by altering society's perception of language. Subsequently, the idea took root that standard English is superior to other varieties of English and indigenous languages. Standardized English purity then became a tool for government control of uncivilized populations as the U.S. took over tribal lands. Richard Lyons, in his essay, Rhetorical Sovereignty, What Do Native Americans Want from Writing, explains that this required assimilation of language forced replacement of one identity over another. It was a cultural violence, enabled in part through acts of physical violence, and also in many ways located at the scene of writing. This attitude of purity then permeated the American educational system for quite some time, and still does today, even though it is losing favor. The book Composition and Rhetoric by Practice with Exercises Adapted for Use in High Schools and Colleges, written by William Williams in 1891, found in the Harvard Library, is a good example of language purity rhetoric of the time. So this is the cover of that book. So in this excerpt, I highlighted every time it mentions purity. It's clear from this passage that purity does not include uncivilized or foreign people, and it forbids the use of words that are low, although it lacks a definition of what that is. Mistakes in grammar usage are referred to very punitively as violations of grammatical purity. I'll give you a second to read that line. So this brings to mind the idea of contamination. They're saying that English is being violated by this mode. So this may seem like kind of antiquated thinking, but unfortunately it still persists today. Jinglish is just one of many examples of what some consider to be contaminated English. African American vernacular English is widely considered a non-standard variety of English, and therefore of low social status and not instrumental in terms of enhancing social mobility of those who use it as their primary language. As you may know, language purity is basically a myth when you look at linguistics. Descriptive grammar is something linguists study as an account of how language is used in real life, where prescriptive grammar is an account of language that sets out rules for how it should be used and what should not be used based on norms derived from a particular model of grammar like Webster's. Descriptive grammar assumes that the only authority for what exists in language is what its native speakers accept and understand as part of their language. Prescriptive grammars, on the other hand, assume the existence of better authority than the usage and judgment of native speakers. But prescriptive rules exist only to express a preference for one structure, usage, or linguistic item over another. In recent years, linguists have actually discovered that there's little difference between standard languages and non-standard language. Both have complex linguistic patterns and allow people to communicate, which is kind of the point, right? In light of what linguists have determined about language, writing instructors have no other choice but to embrace the inevitability of language contamination, as the United States continues to be a multicultural society and always was. Code switching, translation, and collaboration then should replace pure grammar correction and the idea of pure language, since they are more effective teaching tools for diverse writing students. You may be familiar with these three terms, but I'll explain them just a little in the context of writing education. Mike Rose, who's pretty well known in the field of education, in his groundbreaking 1985 essay, The Language of Exclusion, talks about the myth of transience, which is basically the idea that if we can do X or Y, the problem of bad grammar will be solved. But transience blinds faculty members to historical realities, some of which I just discussed, that views it as a problem in the first place. Based on this history, adherence to language purity ideology is basically adherence to aversion. Clueless in Academy by Gerald Graff, who is well known for his book They Say, I Think, differentiates between student speak and intellectual speak. Alison Pruitt, she's also an educator, in her essay Taking It Personally, states, academic prose almost becomes a kind of separate language with its own jargon and proper form. I believe intellectual speak, as Graff refers to it, is a language, or at least a language variety, and should be recognized as such. Thus, switching between one's home language and standard American English is a form of code switching. One is not superior to the other. See, what I'm doing right now in this presentation is code switching and translation. At home, I might be like, wow, this Daniel Webster was kind of a bastard. But I've translated this idea into intellectual speak, or the language of academia, as I like to call it. So another method of inclusion in education is collaborative education. When students collaborate with each other and talk, different viewpoints can be shared. And contamination can actually occur more easily. Pedagogically, writing professors fostering collaboration should act as a coach, a guide, or translator, and encourage student interaction. Educators should start to lead the group's cognitive discussion, but also encourage students to work with each other. And thus, metacognitive regulation becomes a shared responsibility. So contamination is good, according to science, basically. Students will learn better in diverse, inclusive environments. They have proven this. I've been using these methods in tutoring for years, and it may be anecdotal, but I can tell you that it works. To foster inclusion for students, writing professors should use code switching and translation. Instructors should look at it as translating the home language into academic language, regardless of what the home language is. Neither is superior to the other, so the students feel included and important. I get that question a lot when I'm tutoring. Why don't we write like how we talk? Which is a valid question. The first time I was asked that, I was like, that's a really good question. And so when I explained to a student that, well, you're translating the way you talk to your friends or your parents to this college environment, they instantly open up and they're like, oh, why didn't you say so? So Jacqueline Jones Royster, in her article, When the First Voice You Hear Is Your Own, really puts it well. She says there is a critical importance to the role of negotiator as someone who can cross boundaries and serve as guide and translator for others, especially in academia. This is the role that I believe writing professors should play. So to recap, contamination is inevitable in language, so embrace it. The idea of pure language in early US history comes from the propaganda of assimilation. Linguistics tells us that there is little difference between standard language and non-standard language. Thus, translation, code switching, and collaboration are more effective teaching tools for writing professors than grammar correction alone. Throw away the red pen. Thank you.
Did we?
Blocking the screen.